This is the story of the first hot rod that I ever built, a 1929 Ford Model A Roadster pickup. Project started out as the battered remains of a 1929 Ford Model A touring car. I found it for sale for $100 when I was 15 years old, so I asked my parents if I could buy it. They said no, so I bought it anyways, and I ended up getting grounded for 3 months, and my dad told me there's no way I was ever going to turn that pile of junk into a car. So I kept that in mind, and I kind of disassembled it and tucked it away in the corner for a few years. In the meantime, I started planning out how I wanted to build it, and I decided that I would make it into a Roadster pickup. The reason for this is the Roadster pickup body in 1928 and 29 is very squared off, so it seemed like something that I'd be able to easily fabricate. And I decided I wanted it channeled 4 inches over the frame, and I was going to install a late model 4-cylinder of some kind. I started constructing the body when I was 19 years old, and I didn't have any money, didn't know what I was doing, so I started building a framework out of old angle iron and bed frames and random bits of steel that I had dumpster dived, and I started skinning over that framework with sheet metal. Again, didn't have any clue what I was doing, but I just kind of dived in and started welding things together and hoping for the best. Obviously, I'd never done anything like this before, so I was just kind of making it up as I went, but the body slowly started taking shape. But one of the problems I ran into is I didn't have a bead roller at the time for making the upper bead along the top of the body. So this became a bit of a problem, so I pondered what to do for a while, and the solution I came up with was just to take some steel plate and cut it down to the correct width, and then use panel adhesive for collision bodywork type applications, and I glued those pieces on using that, and it ended up sticking and holding for the life of the car. I believe it's still holding on actually, so kind of crude, but it did work. The next thing is I began repairing where the windshield bolted on. These were ripped off of the cowl I had, so I fabricated those and welded them on, and then I started repairing the rust on the lower cowl. This was the first patch panel I ever welded into a car, so I kind of documented the process. Again, I didn't have any tools at the time, so everything was done by hand. Leave a comment and let me know what was the first car you ever welded a patch panel into. I apparently was proud of this or something because I took a lot of pictures as I went. This was all MIG welded at the time, and I was still learning how to weld, but we got through it and slowly got it all kind of smoothed out bit by bit, and then there's the final product there, and there's the other side all welded in as well. And then I started constructing kind of a floor structure for the body, and with that the body was all one piece. So the next problem was the gas tank was severely rusted, so I found a donor gas tank that was dented. So I began repairing the dents on the top of it and got it all kind of smoothed out the best I could. And I guess I was proud of this too because I took a lot of pictures of it. And then I started straightening out the windshield posts. You can see it's quite bent. There's the after. I also chopped it. I can't remember how much I chopped it, but there is the final product there. And the next thing is I found a 36 Ford out in the field. As you can see, there wasn't much left of it, but I was able to salvage the dash, and so I kind of got that straightened out, and I thought I was going to use it in the car. Plans ended up changing. One evening I got a phone call from an old hot rodder, and he told me he had a 32 Ford grill shell and insert for $100, so I raced over there and snapped it up. It was a little bit damaged around the filler neck, so I decided to fill and peak that area as was done on hot rods back in the day. So I got that all welded in and smoothed out, and I was super pumped to get an original 32 Ford grill. The next problem is I needed a frame, so I cheated and I ordered a perimeter frame from Brookville Roadster. At the time they were around $900, and the cheapest original frame I could find was $400, so I kind of justified it that way. If I was to do it again, I would just have started with an original frame, but I got the body channeled down 4 inches over the frame, started mocking things up. Now that the body was mounted to the frame, I started fitting the doors a little bit better, And the next problem was I needed a suspension, so I got a dropped axle set up from Pete and Jake's. Again, I kind of cheated there, but it is what it is. I also used original 34 Ford wishbones and I split them and got them mounted to the inside edge of the frame. I needed a drivetrain next, so in keeping with my plan that I made as a 15-year-old, I picked up a Ford Ranger with a 4-cylinder 5-speed, and I ripped the engine, transmission, and rear end out of that truck, so I apologize to all you Ford Ranger enthusiasts, but that truck did suffer the same fate as some of the other parts cars on this channel. Then I started mocking up the drivetrain in the truck and started checking all of my clearance. And I also need to get the rear end mounted, so I started out with this bracket kit from Speedway and I got that mocked up. I wasn't really happy with it, so I ended up changing it later, but it did kind of locate the rear end, at least temporarily. And then I guess I took a picture of this for some reason, and again checking clearance to the radiator. And I started building motor mounts, so pretty simple motor mounts, but they were fairly sturdy. And the problem on one side, the factory motor mount had a weird angle, so I ended up having to fabricate my own motor mount to the block and getting that all situated so it was level. Next I built the transmission mount, and I just copied one that I saw in a catalog, and it's a bolt-on style, and I figured I could just build it myself. So there's the brackets that weld to the frame, and then there's the drop-down cross member in pieces, and then we got it all welded together and assembled in the truck. And there's a picture of that all there. So then I found a set of 36 Ford rear wishbones, and of course they were ruined. So as usual, everything we start with is garbage. So after pondering my choices, I decided to just repair them. So there they are, repaired, and then I put new bushings in, obviously, and I used those to locate the rear end, and I was much happier with it. And finally, the truck was a roller, so this is a big moment. Always with any hot rod project, you get it rolling. So we kind of had to stand back and look at it for a while. Next, I started fabricating a box for the truck, and originally my plan was just to build one completely from scratch. And so I started on that and started fiddling with it, and I wasn't really too happy with it. It was just looking a little bit too homemade. So I kind of put that on ice, and then I got to finishing up the rest of the chassis. I had to get the steering box mounted and the steering hooked up. I used Vega steering box and then 39 Ford steering column. I also set up the shock mounts. They're Ford F1 that have been cut down, and then I also added a bracket for the headlights and messed around there. So then I blew the whole car apart, pulled everything right back down to the bare frame, and the plan was to bring the frame into work and finish weld all the brackets with a 220 volt welder, and then bodywork the frame and paint it. So that is what I did. There's the frame all freshly painted. After the frame was painted, I cleaned up the rest of the suspension parts and got them all assembled again for hopefully what would be the final time. And then I kind of stood back and admired whatever mess that I had made here. And this was, again, another momentous occasion. And then I got the body temporarily set back on. In the meantime, I was able to find an original Ford Model A truck box. It was quite battered, but it was original and it had the look I wanted, so I began chopping the living heck out of it. I took out about 12 inches and shortened it, and then I had to fabricate a new front panel because the one with the bed was too badly damaged. So I got that all fabricated and installed. And of course the bottom of the stake pockets and the entire rear cross member of the bed was completely rusted out. So I had to fabricate all of that as well. And so I got that all welded in and whatever. And so finally the bed was halfway solid again. Next, I fabricated a mounting frame for the front of the bed, which also doubled as mounting support for the gas tank. And I started getting that assembled and kind of mocked up. And so we kind of had to stand back and look and make sure we were happy with everything. And then I began finish welding the box together. So there is the fully welded seam on the box. And I also cut down the lower side aprons and did some fiddling with those. The engine also got painted, and I installed all new gaskets and a new timing belt and whatever else it needed. And then that got all kind of put back together, new clutch, and got it all back in the chassis again. So that was another big exciting moment, I guess. And then I got distracted with a side quest. I thought, hey, I should build a hood for this thing. So I started mocking that up, and there was a fatal flaw in my plan here, which we'll get into a little bit later. I started making hood sides using 37 Chevy truck hood sides and got those all cut down and figured out, and all the while I was completely oblivious to the fact that I had made a terrible mistake. So I was fully welding these and getting them all dialed in, and I was just so pleased with myself. But there's an issue. If you put a 32 Ford grill shell on a Model A, you need to lower the grill more than the cowl because the 32 grill shell is higher. And once I pushed it outside, I realized that the whole thing was flowing uphill and it looked terrible. So I had to abandon the hood project until later on. Next up, the truck got blown apart and the body and box went out for sandblasting. And I started focusing on reassembling the engine and finishing the mechanical on the chassis. So I got all that put together, all new brake lines and whatever had to be done. And I got everything wired up. I built the exhaust, if you could even call it an exhaust. I used that heat wrap stuff because I thought it looked cool, I guess. And I installed a Weber carburetor on the Ranger engine as well as the later Ranger exhaust manifold.
Uh-oh.
Wire's getting hot. Maybe that's a ground. I thought that was a ground. Maybe we don't need it. It's getting real hot, that wire.
Thought it was a ground.
Well, it goes to that computer or whatever, but then it goes to ground.
No, definitely don't go to ground.
Yeah.
chrome in it, so as long as it runs.
Yay!
That distributor might be a notch out, I can't tell, but it's pretty much all the way this way almost.
After that victory, the body went back on and I fabricated a transmission tunnel. And now back to the dash, I found a 1956 Oldsmobile gauge cluster. So I decided to use that instead of the 36 Ford dash, and I grafted that into the original Model A dash. And I used a 39 Ford Deluxe steering wheel. So there it is, all kind of mocked up in there. And I was quite pleased with how well the Oldsmobile cluster fit in the dash. I also made a seat frame type of thing, I guess. And so now things were coming together, and finally the first drive. Of course, my mom also got to go for a drive, and then I quickly hammered the rest of the car together and got it to its first car show just in the nick of time. And then I drove the car like this for the rest of the summer and kind of worked out all the bugs and whatever. Actually, I don't think there was a whole lot of issues. It kind of just did what it needed to do, so that was nice. Over the winter, I started fixing the grill height issue. I had the radiator cut down. I used a 65 Mustang radiator because I was told they fit, and they do fit, but in order to get them to fit on a channeled car with a 32 grill, you have to get them cut down. So when all was said and done, I would have been better off just buying the proper radiator to begin with, but live and learn, I guess. I also installed some sort of a wood floor in the bed, and so that was nice to kind of get that out of the way. And then I kind of drove the car like that for another year, and I also began kind of fitting the hood top again. There it is, all fit in place. I had to rework the one that I originally built. In the fall, I tore the whole car apart again and began doing bodywork, so that was super exciting, but it had to be done. So I pulled the box off and I started finishing all the repairs on the box. There was still some rust in it and a bunch of dents and dings and whatever, so I started fixing all of that and getting it sorted out that way. These old truck beds really take a beating, so it took quite a bit. And then I also got the body work done on the main body, and so I got that in primer and started prepping that for paint. And I decided what I was going to do is brush paint the car. So I brush painted the entire car with Tremclad. I used a foam roller and a brush, and I put on very thin coats, and I wet sanded in between every second coat, and then I polished it all up. And it's not show quality, but it came out not too bad for being brush painted with Tremclad. So that was kind of a lot of work though, and took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. And so I didn't have a chance to finish painting the entire car over the winter, and I wanted to drive it again in the spring. So I started throwing the whole car back together again. I just put the box in primer and the doors in primer and drove it around for another year, just like that. In between working on the car, I had also become a full-time junk hoarder, and so I started repairing the tailgate, and then I made a big purchase. That's right, I bought a set of wide white walls and got rid of the stupid ugly radials that I hated right from the beginning. People always told me bi-ply tires are no good, and so I put radials on the car and absolutely hated it. It didn't drive all that good, so I finally bought bi-ply tires. And you know what? The car drove better with the bi-plies, and not only that, but it looked way the hell better too, so there you go. Over the winter, I painted the doors, the hood, and the grille, and there's a reflection in the paint. I once again brush painted everything, so it took quite a while. I bent up new bars for the grill and got those installed to replace the missing ones, and then started reassembling the car again. There's the windshield going back on, and that is the same windshield post that was folded in half when I started. I also bead rolled some aluminum door panels and interior panels. There they are, and started assembling all of that. I also got the steering wheel painted and a bunch of other little things done like that. And of course, I once again ran out of time, so I didn't have a chance to paint the bed over the winter. My sister sewed up the seat cover, and then the car went into its first and last indoor car show. And I made a display out of a bunch of garbage that was laying in my yard. So that was that. And then I enjoyed driving the car for the rest of the summer again. Put a lot of miles on it. Drove on a lot of roads that it probably shouldn't have been driven on, but it did what it needed to do. And it was a lot of fun, I guess. There you have it. There's the conclusion of the 1929 Model A Roadster pickup build. I bought the body or the cowl for that car when I was 15 years old. I started building it when I was 19, and I think I had it on the road when I was 22 years old. And so I learned a lot building it. I didn't know anything about building cars when I started or working on cars, but I just kind of figured it out as I went, and that's what I ended up with. I piddled around with it for a couple more years after I got it on the road and got it painted and whatever. And long story short, the car no longer exists. What happened is I dismantled the entire car and sold a bunch of pieces off of it, anything that had any value really, and I used the money from that to buy a bunch of parts for my 1936 Chevy truck behind me here. And so no regrets there. I did keep the 32 grill, the 39 banjo steering wheel, the original cowl that I started with, the truck box, and the seat that my sister made for it. Other than that, everything's gone, and it's never going to be a vehicle again, and I'm fine with that. The reason I parted it out is a couple of reasons. The first is that the car stayed pretty true to the vision that I had for it when I was 15 years old. And the problem with that is that by the time I got done the car, my vision and my ideas had changed considerably. So the car was not really exactly what I wanted anymore, and it was a lot of fun to drive. It drove really well, actually. It was fun, but it wasn't, what I wanted anymore. There were a lot of things that I wasn't happy with or that I thought needed to be changed, and it was going to be easier or less work to just build another car than to try to change that car and make it into something again. I didn't want to sell a car as a complete car, and the reason for that is I didn't want somebody else having my car. It was still a personal thing that I put a lot of personal effort into, and so to see somebody else driving around in it or changing it to suit their personal taste or whatever, I just didn't want to deal with that. And I didn't want to deal with all the mouth breathers that go along with trying to sell an old car. So it was easier just to part it out. And the other thing too is the car was pretty crude body-wise. Like I said, I built that body out of like junk metal, old bed frames and whatever I could find, scrounge up. So there wasn't really anything there that I'd want to have someone else deal with. It was pretty crude. I do have another Model A that I want to build someday. It's a 1928 Roadster, so the same cowl and doors, but it has the actual Roadster rear section, which is kind of the car that I've always wanted anyways. So we will be building that someday, and we'll be building it more in the style that I prefer now, and taking what I learned building that car and applying it to building a better car, I guess. Better. So I hope more than 3 people watch this, and hopefully the 3 people that do enjoyed the picture video or whatever. I usually don't make videos like that, but I've been wanting to do a video on that car for quite some time, and obviously it was all built prior to YouTube, so all I had was pictures. It took a long time to put that together and find all those pictures. I had to go through the archives and through an old computer that crashed every 5 minutes, and it was like a huge ordeal. And so I've been kind of slowly gathering everything over the last couple of years to put this video together. It's now kind of all together and finally documented. The whole story's all there, and we can move on to bigger and better and more horrifying things. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Maybe.